Welcome to Healing Childhood Trauma, the podcast for millennial women who are ready to heal from the past. Here, we have the deeper discussions on emotional well-being and practical tips that will empower you to transform your relationships and underlying anxiety from insecure to secure attachment. I'm Lizandra, your host and psychotherapist. I'm a little bit obsessed with human development, deep conversations, and finding the lesson even in the most challenging of circumstances. I'm very happy to have you with me on this journey of self-discovery where we unpack the past and heal in the present. I think there's this huge assumption that it's men who mostly have avoidant attachment. And when we talk about the different types of relationship patterns and how that plays out, it's always perceived as the woman is the one who is needy and clingy and the man is distant and avoidant. And that isn't always necessarily the pattern that happens. I'm going to talk about what it looks like when women have avoidant attachment because it can look a little bit different and it's not what we're used to either hearing about or talking about. But I see it a lot in the therapy room and there are many women who have many avoidant traits or are very dismissive avoidant. And it's happening a lot more than what you would think. And as someone with personal experience, I think that when I am triggered, I definitely have some avoidant traits. And I was thinking about it today, and actually a lot of my friends also have avoidant traits. So if you're one of my friends listening to this, hey girl, I'm talking to you. Yes, we have avoidant traits, but it's not always a terrible thing or a bad thing. And this is how I always like to frame attachment. It's not that any one particular attachment style is better than the other. It's more about learning what our previous childhood experiences have been and what it is as a result that we then need from our relationships in order to feel safe, loved, and cared for. It doesn't mean that you come from a place of being broken. It doesn't mean that you don't have the capacity to have good relationships. But it does mean there's certain relational patterns that need to happen in order for you to feel like you are in connection with someone. And everyone's pattern's different. And it's context dependent, it's relationship dependent, and there is no one size fits all when it comes to attachment because we are human, we are nuanced, we have different life experiences, we have our different values, our different cultures. So all of these things play a part into our beliefs about relationships and attachment. It's not about fitting into any one box of you have an anxious attachment style, so that means this. So I hope that just kind of clears it up and gives you some context as to how we have these conversations about attachment and that it's not prescriptive. If you don't already know, our attachment patterns come from our earliest childhood experiences. So whatever we have experienced from our caregivers sets the tone for the rest of our relationship patterns and also how we then attach to our caregivers. If we have caregivers who are not responsive to our needs, dismissive, otherwise preoccupied with their own selves, their own lives, dealing with their own perhaps mental health struggles or their own relationship struggles, or are unable to be there because they are having to work the majority of the time. So it means that there is a certain amount of perhaps emotional disconnect and maybe in some circumstances neglect, then that can impact how we then form an attachment to our caregivers. Because if our caregivers are unable to show us consistency in a way that meets our needs enough, because it doesn't have to be about perfection. It doesn't mean that your parents always get it right and that they cater to every whim and upset that you experience, but it's just about them being there enough. And if you don't have that consistency and it doesn't feel like it's enough, that's often where those attachment patterns can come from. So because this episode is focusing more on avoidant attachment, that's what I'm going to focus on. But if you want to learn more about attachment styles as an overview, there is other episodes where I have talked about the 4 attachment styles: anxious attachment, avoidant, secure, and disorganized. I will link the episodes in the show notes that has relevance to what I've talked about today. So you can go and have a binge of that if you want a little bit more context or you want to learn more about perhaps the anxious attachment style or even the secure attachment style, because I'm pretty sure I've got an episode on that one as well. When we're talking about avoidant attachment and the root of where it comes from, what I've seen is often it's been about the parent being there physically, but not necessarily being there emotionally. It was about being told that you're fine when you were upset about something, even when you weren't. So you had to kind of figure out for yourself how to self-soothe, how to manage your own feelings, and how if something went wrong or you felt like you were in crisis or you needed support with something, that support wasn't there because you were kind of just left to figure it out on your own. There was no actual real support or guidance. And especially with overachievers, they tend to be rewarded for being very self-sufficient, and they can be called the easy child. Like, they never caused any problems, they were pretty good in school, they did what they needed to do, they got the grades, they conformed, they listened, they didn't need too much. And sometimes when you hear a parent describe their child as, oh my gosh, she was such an easy baby, she never cried, she never needed anything, she never gave me any trouble, she was so responsible. And the problem with that is children are not born responsible. That's not part of what childhood development looks like. Children learn how to be responsible because they feel like they don't have any other choice, because the grown-ups around them are not giving the kind of emotional support that they need. Perhaps the parent is emotionally unintelligent and has a certain sense of immaturity. Perhaps the environment is very chaotic. There's nothing structured. There's no clear boundaries. And so when there are no clear boundaries, and that's something that children really need, they actually need to feel the boundaries in order for them to feel supported. And when you have a healthy example of what boundaries are, it's also a form of protection for that child. That child is going to feel the support if there are boundaries there, because it's knowing that no matter how much they push or no matter what goes on, there's a parent around them that's almost got like this barrier of safety around them. And quite often with avoidant attachment, they don't experience that feeling of being protected, being thought of enough. And because they don't have that protection from their parents or those kind of boundaries from their parents, they create those boundaries for themselves. And so you can end up having, probably, especially with an avoidant attachment, going too far with boundaries, being too rigid about your boundaries. But it's as a form of you trying to have that feeling of safety. You're trying to create that safe environment for yourself that wasn't there for you in your childhood. So what does avoidant attachment tend to look like in women? It looks like getting very irritated if somebody gets too close or someone needs something from you. It looks like feeling trapped when someone wants to go deeper with you or someone wants emotional depth. It feels like it's too much, it's too overwhelming, it feels uncomfortable. You might be someone who is not much of a hugger, like you need that physical distance. You don't like people being too clingy or needing too much from you. And that can apply in your role as a parent, in your romantic relationships, and especially friendships, which I don't think is talked about enough. A lot of these attachment patterns, they don't just come up in your romantic relationships. And I think it's almost glamorized about it coming out in romantic relationships, when in reality, it's not just about your romantic relationships. All of these attachment patterns will come out in all different aspects of your life, in your parenting, how you feel about yourself, in your work, with your family, with your friends. It's a whole relational dynamic that is more than just romantic relationships. And I always have to kind of emphasize that, because I think too much attachment and attachment healing is focused on romantic love when there are so many other just as significant forms of love. And when you do have more avoidant traits, you can tend to shut down when things feel like they're getting too intense. A relationship is getting too intense, a conversation is getting too intense. That can just feel very uncomfortable. And you're very good at being able to, and I think a key difference I think that I've definitely noticed in my clients when they have avoidant attachment and they're very high functioning, is that they are excellent at articulating exactly how they feel. They are very self-aware and they can intellectualize their feelings until the cows come home. But what they find it really difficult to do is to connect with that feeling and to actually sit with that feeling. And it's almost like the intellectualizing and the talking it through and the over talking, it's just a way to avoid connection. It's a way to avoid the emotion. So it looks like you're doing the work, but really you're not. You're avoiding. You're avoiding feelings, you're avoiding emotions. And it can be really hard to spot, but that is a key trait usually of what avoidant attachment looks like in women, especially who are high functioning. So if you relate to this, You are literally my favorite type of client. Because there's so much richness in that work, and I thoroughly enjoy working with women who are very self-aware and also very disconnected from their feelings, because it's something that I can absolutely relate to, and I've done a lot of work on myself to try and break some of those patterns. And I'm very good at being an intellectualizer, and I can talk about feelings all day, or I can talk about a situation, but sometimes it's very difficult for me to actually sit in the feelings unless I am intentionally leaning into it, because it's not my natural way of coping. And that's, anyway, I'm getting into me, and this is not my therapy session, girl. So let's let's pivot. A lot of these avoidant attachment patterns come from a place of fear, because on one side, you want connection and you want to have deeper relationships, but the thing is that you don't trust it. It's like you want someone to make you feel safe, but at the same time, you fear relying on them because you're so used to people letting you down and feeling disappointed. And you hate that feeling of being disappointed. You hate that feeling of, oh, I've let someone close to me and then they've let me down. So although you hate emotional distance, you're also the one creating it. And avoidant patterns often get mislabeled in women because society really praises women who are more independent and women who are leaning towards more burnout culture. And it's like, yes, it's seen as a positive thing to have boundaries, and it absolutely is. But sometimes those boundaries can be taken to the extreme. It's being too rigid about boundaries. It's almost having all of these rules and regulations as to what you will and won't accept, and not really being flexible in a healthy way about it. And it's not used as what the point of boundaries are. The point of boundaries are to have a healthy relationship and to understand where you begin and end and where somebody else begins and ends. And it's about creating safety and creating connection in relationships if boundaries are done the right way. But what people with more avoidant traits tend to do is use boundaries as a form to keep people at a distance, to be more guarded, and to not allow people to get close, because ultimately you're trying to avoid getting hurt. You're trying to avoid those previous abandonment feelings, which stems from your childhood of not having your needs met in a way that was enough for you. So you keep yourself busy so that you're not exposed to anything, so that you don't have to sit in the discomfort of not feeling good enough or worrying that you're going to live life alone. So you keep yourself busy so that you're not exposed to anything. You overthink instead of being vulnerable. And you stay productive to avoid slowing down, because if you slow down, that's when those uncomfortable feelings arise, and that is what you are trying to avoid. And family dynamics can then feel really draining for you because you're always positioning yourself in the role of a fixer. You slip back into those patterns of being self-sufficient, and you keep getting into relationships and friendships with the same emotionally distant people, the people who almost mirror that behavior, because it feels easier to have relationships with people who are not particularly needy, who don't want much from you, who don't have high expectations from you. And healthy partners can also feel like they're too much because they want too much from you, or they're too emotional, they're too touchy-feely. And you can feel really lonely even when you're surrounded with lots of people. I always think it's helpful to reframe how you think about avoidant attachment, especially if it's more traits that you have and you feel like it's a part of yourself that you don't like, or a part of yourself that you feel ashamed of, or that part of you that feels unlovable. And you can reframe it by thinking about, it's not that you're cold or that you don't know how to be close to people in relationships. It's more that it's an old survival pattern that helped you to feel safe in the past. And it helped you to cope. It helped you to feel like you had more control. But at the same time, it's not necessarily how you have to live now. Now, as an adult, you have options. You have ways to show up differently in your relationships. And it's about taking more risks and using that self-awareness to not only be able to articulate how you feel, but also stopping to reflect on not just talking about how you think you feel, but actually feeling it, like actually taking a moment to sit with it and see what is the emotion coming up for you. And it's trying to learn in the moment what it looks like, or when you're pulling away from people because you've got that feeling of fear or that feeling of discomfort. And it doesn't mean letting your doors open to like absolutely everyone. You can still have a certain amount of boundaries, but it's also recognizing where those boundaries are coming from. Is it coming from a place of fear and self-protection? And when might it be appropriate to let people in more? And it reminds me of some work that I've done with clients in the past where they've wanted to have more connection in their relationships, but it's felt really difficult for them. And they've noticed a pattern that they have these people that they've known in their lives for years and years and years that they would probably call their best friend, but they never really talk about anything more than what's superficial. It's always just, how are you, babe? Yeah, fine. Work's good. Kids are fine. Relationship is good. Going on holiday next week. Like, it's all just like very superficial stuff that doesn't go any deeper, which it's okay to have relationships and friendships that are more surface level. But if that is the kind of relationships that you're having with friends who you have known for the majority of your life, or any kind of relationship, because it's really not about the length of time that you've known someone, but there are relationships where there just needs to be more depth, and there needs to be almost like a knowing, like someone has to really know you, like know the core of you and really see you, and for you to be seen. That is a part of what healthy attachment is. And if you're not doing that in your longest friendships, then it's probably worth addressing, well, how do I become more connected in my friendships? Because that sounds very distant. And clients have talked in the past about feeling very isolated, very removed from people, or that people don't really know the real them. And they focus a lot on being there as a good friend and perhaps listening to other people's problems, but not necessarily letting them in on what they're experiencing. Not really being vulnerable with their friendships and saying, actually, I'm having a really hard time at the moment. I'm feeling really overwhelmed. I'm feeling really sad. I've been feeling like it's hard for me to get out of bed. I've been struggling at work. My relationship isn't going well. All of these other things that they could be talking about and they could be sharing, they tend to withhold because they are so used to dealing with that on their own. And being able to heal from this is starting to show discernment for what relationships deserve to see more from you. What relationships will you allow for yourself to be seen more? And doing that in a way that it's going to feel somewhat scary because it's not what you're used to, but it's pushing yourself just a little bit, because in that discomfort can come growth. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. It doesn't have to be that all of a sudden everyone's your best friend and you're spilling all of your childhood traumas, but it's just taking your time with it and letting people in slowly and allowing yourself to have needs without feeling like you need to apologize, and sometimes asking when you need help or when you want support or when you need support, and that there's no weakness and no shame in that. If you want to do more work on this, I am available for one-to-one therapy. I work with clients in the UK and in the EU for one-to-one therapy sessions. If you are outside of that region, there are still other ways that we can work together. I've got a program on secure attachment. I offer workshops and coaching. So just reach out and I'll let you know what would be the best fit for you. If you're not quite ready for that yet, binge the episodes. There are so many more episodes that are based on attachment. I've also got a free guide. So if you sign up to my mailing list, there's a free PDF guide called The Ultimate Guide to Secure Relationships. And that's actually pretty comprehensive. Although it's a free guide, there is a lot within that. So do go and check that out. Okay, thanks for sharing this time with me today. I will catch you in the next episode. Bye. Thank you for joining this episode of Healing Childhood Trauma. I hope you found today's discussion insightful and empowering. Remember, healing is a journey and you are not alone on this path. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review on your favourite podcast platform. And you can share this episode with a friend. Your feedback helps this podcast to reach more women who are ready to heal and build secure, healthy relationships and heal from the past.